Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. In today's episode, we are talking all about the 2024 Event Pros on the Go retreat, but not only that, how you can also plan a retreat. So we're going to drop lots of tips and tricks along the way and share a little bit about our experience. We have a guest who co-hosts the retreat with me, Laura Lloyd, and we are thrilled to have this conversation and share it with you. We would love to see you at future retreats. So stay tuned for 2025. There is a lot coming your way. But let's get into the episode for now so you can learn a little bit more about it and how you can plan your next retreat.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Logan Clements, and I'm joined by fellow co-host Mary Davidson, as well as a lovely guest that you will recognize her because she has been on the pod a few times already. But to save as much time as possible for this recap that we're doing on Mary and Laura's Event Pros on the Go 2024 retreat, I'm still going to introduce you to Laura if you haven't heard some of her past episodes with us. Laura Yarbrough Lloyd is a freelance event planner and manager in the sports, corporate, and luxury event industries. She specializes in VIP management, hospitality clubs and suites, player and guest services, and VIP event experiences. She is the co-founder of the Event Pros on the Go retreat, as well as an event career coach helping event professionals create their dream event careers and work at their dream events. Laura, welcome again to the podcast. Anything you want to add to that lovely introduction?
No, I think that's it. I'm just excited to be back and realize that we've done 2 of these recaps now in less than a year, which is exciting. Good trajectory for the retreat.
Yeah, definitely. We are really thrilled to talk about it today, as well as sharing some tips and tricks with you listeners. And so we do a little why we chose this topic, as you know, and we know why Laura is here joining us. But also, as she mentioned, we have debriefed the last 2 Event Pros on the Go retreats. That's episode 19 and episode 102, which we can link to in the show notes if you're curious. But here we are. It's 2024. The 3rd retreat happened in January of this year. And it is this kind of full-on event experience that Laura and I have the opportunity to host. And so we wanted to debrief it here. But as we said, we also are going to talk a little bit about how you could plan your own retreat if it's something that you have questions about. So let's go ahead and get into the conversation today. And so we thought a good place to start would be to tell you all a little bit about the origin of the retreat, like what it is, who it's for, and just give you a little bit of a background there briefly. So Laura, do you want to share a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, sure. So the retreat started in 2021 when Mary and another of our event friends, Jessica, wanted to create, I think you called it the event retreat.
Yes, just very
Yeah.
blanket.
And
the event retreat.
I went on it without having ever met Mary in person, and it was really fun. And so for the following years, I kind of stepped in as a co-host and planner, and we've had 3 now, and we've gone global. We've done the US, the UK, and technically the Bahamas on the last one. So it's been really nice. I don't know if you want to add any more about the history of it and why you started it in the first place.
I think we just tried it. We thought this would be something that's cool to try. And I know we felt at the time, Jessica and I felt like, wow, wouldn't it be cool to like go on a vacation with our event friends and like just be able to talk events? Because I think we felt a void in our personal lives of like, we're always talking to like friends and family about events, but they don't get it. And so to be able just to talk with people who understand was the intention. And that's definitely what it turned into be. And then it's grown into something more structured than that for sure.
Yeah, we definitely put together like a program, and each one has been different. It has a different focus. The first one was kind of like relaxation, recharge. The second one was town and country. It had a bit of a fam aspect as well as educational. And then the last one was work and wellness, which was really interesting spin.
Yeah, I know. Again, I would highly encourage listeners to kind of go back and listen to episodes 19 and 102, because I think we really dive into some of the evolution between those first years and your third year now in the retreat. But just out of curiosity for the two of you, like, what do you love about creating your own event like this Event Pros on the Go retreat?
That's a tough one. I know I love creating events because I've got a really creative brain that needs some kind of outlet. And I really enjoy professional development through really creative ways. I think there's a lot better ways that we can do it than the standard conference, FAM, all those style events that you usually see. Mary, would you like to add anything to
Yeah.
that? Why do you like creating your events? Because I know it's one of your major goals is to continue creating your own.
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of creating events. For me, from like an entrepreneurial like business standpoint, I want to be able to like diversify our income, and to be able to create events to me is a great way to have or to be able to control sustainable events versus like always waiting on clients to rehire you back. And so it's
Mhm.
something that I'm passionate about. And not only with that, I think Logan and I have learned this too through the Better Events conference. When you have the ability to create your own events, it also just like gives you a different perspective because you're involved in everything, including the success or the failure of the event, more so than when you're hired on. There's still some responsibility there, of course, but it's a great perspective for us to be able to bring to our clients because we are in their shoes in this situation. We are the ones creating and responsible for it. So I just think it's a really nice reminder. Like, it also keeps us fresh with the other part of our work that we do.
For sure. I like doing that as well. I just like having like free reign to do whatever we want. And, sometimes clients, I think especially corporate clients, they won't spend the money on certain things that will make a difference. The little things, the surprise and delight, kind of like breaking the system and doing a totally different format. And like a lot of times it's really hard to convince people to do that. But between the two of us, we don't need to convince each other. So I really like the freedom of that.
Yeah, and I think it can sound daunting for people, but I feel like you guys have highlighted some of the positives of going through that process. But listeners have asked us, I don't know if it's because of this retreat or just because of our podcast, but how you plan a retreat. Maybe they're not necessarily thinking of doing it themselves, but for a client, or doing even, I would say, like incentive trips, that kind of thing could sometimes fall under this retreat blanket. And so we wanted to walk through the process of how you guys approached planning the 2024 Event Pros on the Go retreat. And I think some other like nuggets of the experience will come out through that. I was an attendee on the this year's retreat, so I have some insight too on like my experience, but I know I'm also curious of just kind of what went in on the planning process. So I feel like starting from the beginning, like we do on the podcast all the time, uh, my first question would be, how'd you pick the location? Which this year location I feel like was a little different.
That was the purpose
Yeah.
to surprise people. It's one of those like late night, what if we did this? And then we were like, yeah, because it just surprises people. It gets people to pay attention.
But we even picked the location in a sense. We had an idea of the location right after. It was like the day or the night after
Yeah,
our 2023 retreat ended. We were fired up. We're like, this is what we're doing.
yeah,
And
we made a logo and
yeah, we
everything
were like ready.
on the retreat. It was fun.
I think so. Yeah. So we did a cruise in 2024. That was the thing that we're alluding to. It was different. And I think we have this hope that it continues to be something that catches people's eye that is different. But to pick it, I would say, Laura, if you would agree that method has changed over time, and that
Mhm.
might be applicable to people who are listening, because at first we were just like, oh, where do we want to go? Is kind of how it started. And then it turned more into like, well, where makes sense, which is why we kind of moved it to the UK, because that's where Laura's located. And so we're able to also like kind of represent that side. And then for the cruise, we did it because, well, it sounded fun. And then we also could do something that's all inclusive. So now we're starting to get more into the strategy behind like the deals that we can make, the locations that make sense. And in the future, we are really trying to lean more into um, locations that are willing to work with us as event professionals. So working with, CVBs and things like that to try to make a decision that makes sense with somebody who's willing to partner with us. And so as you're looking to perhaps plan a retreat or an incentive trip, you can also really lean on a lot of these organizations that we've talked about before, like CVBs and tourism authorities, because they can help you narrow that search down. And that is what we hope to do more in the future.
Yeah, and I would say absolutely go to like hosted buyer events. That's where you can meet all these people all at once, which is really good. And you get their buy-in as well when you're explaining the concept, because I know fam trips are approached really differently. They're created a year or so in advance, and you're approached by someone who's organized that, whereas we're doing it the other way around. So if you're doing a retreat, you have to be really proactive finding those partners. And I'd say the hosted buyer events are the best way to get your foot in the door with all these different organizations, whether it's a hotel chain or a CVB, like Mary said, or a tourism board.
And I realized too, we love to just to describe terms. We've said fam a couple times. So I don't know, Mary or Laura, if you want to, we've talked about it in our event verbiage episode back in 91, but
Mhm.
if one of you want to just describe it for our listeners.
Who's taking this one?
I'll
Mary?
take it. You add to it. A FAM is like abbreviated like capital FAM, like fam, but it's a familiarization trip, which is a weird word to be honest. And it's it's where you're hosted as an event professional to come to a city and experience the city. So they will usually kind of like wine and dine you, and you'll have some experiences. You'll see local venues and hotels in the hopes that you'll bring business there, but they want you to really experience their city. So they're pulling out the stops so that you have a good time. And that's a fam, and fams are cool for sure. But we do try to be clear that this is not a fam. And we've had attendees say, I see that once they've attended, like, this is not a fam. It's like a different type of, the goals are different. It's more of a collaborative experience. And the intentions behind it are quite different, but there is still an element of fun. But yes, that's what a fam is. And a CVB would be a convention and visitor bureau.
Yeah, I always thought of, and then having experienced a fam for the first time this year, I would describe it as kind of a really long sales pitch, a very nice and loving sales pitch. And the people you meet are quite lovely, but they are constantly kind of trying to sell you on that location. And I feel like the retreat isn't a sales pitch. And I know you guys are talking about working with CVBs and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see how this evolves, because I know there was a level of, I don't know, exhaustion that I felt post fam that I didn't necessarily feel coming off the retreat. I know work and wellness was the theme this year. But just, yeah, something to think about, I feel like, for folks. But I feel like both Mary and I agree. We encourage everyone to go on one fam at least, and then you can
Yeah.
decide if
Good
you.
experience. Yeah.
And I would say with FAMs, a major difference in a retreat and a FAM, at a FAM, everyone will be like you, whether you do corporate events or incentives, or you may all be travel agents, but everyone's basically the same. But the retreat, and any retreat you plan, everyone's different. We're all in the same industry, but as a huge industry, we're all super different. That's why I think that the retreat model is really exciting.
I know with events, we always talk about, you need your dates to start booking vendors and all that fun stuff. So with retreat planning or a trip like this, like, did you pick the location first or the dates first?
I can't quite remember, but we did send a survey out, and that was really important. I think any kind of market research you can do, sending a survey out, you can even incentivize it to get people to fill out a survey. And we're all in the event industry. January is a super slow month, but actually late January tends to start getting really busy as you prepare for the spring events. So I think the good thing about a cruise is you can go at any time and you can get good weather. So I want to say that we chose the cruise first, and then we chose the dates because we knew that we would be able to go anywhere and benefit from good weather. But it's definitely with the attendees in mind and when they would have the most availability.
Yeah, I think you guys also were at an advantage by being your attendee, essentially. So I feel like this could have been a lot harder if you were planning a retreat for, some Wall Street people that maybe you don't work on Wall Street. So
Yeah.
understanding when that ebb and flow of the schedule goes. But yeah, to definitely, I think the survey, I know Mary and I, that's an approach we used with the Better Events Conference of trying to get a feel for dates and things like that. But that like late December, early January seems to be a momentary lull for a lot of us in the
And if
industry.
I can, yeah, just add to that too, like if someone is thinking about planning this for another industry or something like that, the the point of the retreat and any retreat, like if it's called a retreat, is to have people retreat from their day to day. Like it's to have these moments of whatever it is that your retreat is, of wellness, of relaxation, of disconnecting from their normal environment. So I would say for a retreat specifically, date is extremely crucial because you want your attendees to be able to disconnect and fully participate. And I know that maybe you could say that for any event, but truly for a retreat, like you don't want them checking their emails typically. And so I would just extra touch on that, I guess, for people to keep that in mind as they plan.
We even said that when on we had, like a website and people looked at it, and we gave some guidelines like this is not for you if you want to check your email every day and work on like micro tasks. It was more of a big picture thing. So I think that's really important to point out if you're planning a retreat for someone. I know a lot of coaches do retreats for their coaching clients now. And it can be really tempting if you're like with your business coach or mindset coach, whatever, whoever you're with, and you're really excited and you want to work on the things that you're talking about on the retreat. But we had to, make it clear that's not what it's about. It's more like big picture thinking, collaboration, just being inspired. Because when you go out of your normal environment, you're inspired anyways. It's like when we're in like the shower, we usually have our best thoughts because we're not at our desks. So that's kind of the whole essence of a retreat.
Yeah, and I was a very cruise resistant person when I heard the news that this retreat was going to be on a cruise. I'd done one when I was like 12 or 13, and it just was one of those like if I could pick any, it's not that I hated it, but if I could pick anything, it probably wasn't a cruise. And that was one of the things I felt that it surprised me this year was because it was on a cruise and because we took off from Miami. I don't know if we mentioned that, and one of our stops was Key West and then also Bimini, Bahamas. So we technically crossed international waters, and it was one of those that like by being on the ship in international waters, you didn't really get cell service the whole time. You weren't going to be able to take phone calls the whole time. Internet was okay on the ship, but not something like, so it like the environment also, I felt like, as opposed to if we just stayed in a hotel in Miami or a hotel in Key West, it did set up for you to have to disconnect, which I know for me was like a big benefit of the trip of just actually just carving out that time and turning off.
Yeah, for sure. I think like at one point I was like, I don't even know what's going on in the outside world because I think there was a day where we didn't have internet. It just didn't work quite well. And so I love that about a retreat, going somewhere that, like you said, Logan, not just in a hotel, just kind of getting outside of your normal atmosphere. Maybe we'll just go in the wilderness next time or something.
One of the things too that we really debated a lot about, and Laura, I'm passing this to you because you really like were the ringleader for this, was the budget. So like, how does someone figure out like your break even point, like the minimum in mind for you to actually be able to do a retreat, like when we're talking about the number of people who need to commit to come? Do you want to share any perspective on that?
Yeah, the budget's tough. I think anytime you're doing ticket sales, essentially, it's just a different ballgame than a normal event budget. Um, we knew how many people we would have to come essentially by determining what are the fixed costs, like what do we absolutely have to cover, and then what's variable based on how many people come. And that's kind of where you can figure out how many people you need to come for it to make sense. And are you going to lose money? Are you going to break even? Or are you going to make money? And then it wasn't until after everyone signed up, we kind of saw what we had left over with. And we really made it stretch, all the little like surprises on each day. And, I think you do want to limit something like this to, I'd say, maximum 20 people. That's the thing that we've said in the past. You'd never really want to go over a certain amount of people because it kind of defeats the purpose. And so with that in mind, that helps you have a starting point, but definitely work out what your fixed costs are, what your variable costs are for different scenarios. That was really important. And set a ticket price. It's scary though. It's scary. So I'd say that to me is the hardest part of planning the retreat. And once that's done and people have signed up, it's smooth sailing because then you're just in your element. You're planning an event.
And that does sound like a challenge for if you're you guys hosting a retreat, or if someone, like you mentioned, Laura, the example of like a coach, selling tickets to their retreat to their group or something, versus if you're planning a retreat, internally, or it's your leadership meeting you're doing a retreat with, you probably have your company or client is setting the budget of what they're willing to pay per person. But I do think it's something that you guys do a good job of keeping in mind that a lot of the folks who come on your retreat are independent, or they work for themselves, they have their own companies, and so it's not something that's like a write off from big business for them to come to that. So I know you guys have been pretty mindful about what you're charging for. And I think you mentioned earlier, Laura, right, wasn't doing a all inclusive option made some of those variables, like was that easier than last year in previous years to have like predicted what some of that like break even was going to come out to?
It was, and I also think that made it more enticing to people, because anytime you do all inclusive, I think naturally the price is going to be lower. I mean, that's why a lot of people go on cruises, or they go to those resorts because they're all inclusive. But that helped a lot. There's so much less you have to budget for, whereas if you're not doing all inclusive, you kind of have to decide: are we gonna, like, how many meals are we gonna cover? What transportation are we going to cover, and things like that. And then you're fortunate if you don't do all inclusive and you have enough money in your pot that you can like surprise people and cover extra meals that you didn't promise, or a happy hour or something like that. But all inclusive is a really attractive model. I'm not sure that it would work all the time, but it certainly was a really, I think, attractive for us to try it out, and attractive for people to sign up as well.
So kind of talking about the schedule for the retreat, remind me, was it 4 days?
4 on the cruise
We're on the
specifically,
cruise. Yeah.
or right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and we did that kickoff when we all arrived on that day. I know some folks
right.
came in a day earlier, but for 4 days, just give our listeners a little bit of insight. Like, how did you design the schedule for the retreat? Because I felt like you guys had a good balance where we weren't over scheduled, but there was still something going on. So just kind of walk folks through that.
I'm giggling as a reaction to that because the first day of the retreat, a lot of people said, like, I'm kinda worried, like, they I don't know how exactly what they said, Laura, but they expressed interest in being concerned about the schedule because there weren't a lot of times when we were all together as a big group of 15, and we were like, "Trust us, you're gonna thank us for that in the end because you don't wanna be with 15 people for 4 days straight, you're gonna go crazy." And, so with that in mind, that is part of what we kept in mind as we were scheduling the retreat. So yes, we definitely wanted intentional time where we were together as an entire group, and that was I don't remember, Laura, but I kind of feel like we started there. We were kinda like, when like, we're gonna have this kickoff lunch, and that's a big group thing, and then, like, a few other group things, and the rest we just kinda filled in.
Yeah, the goal was once or twice a day we would get together as a group, and not just to sit around and chat, but we had a program for even like a brunch. We had program, we had a little run of show, and it was intentional, and there was a goal. Um, but we knew that people would get into groups anyways, which is why we didn't want to overschedule it. And it is a retreat. You're retreating from that, like, constantly being on all the time. And so if you're the kind that wants to, go out with a group when you're not scheduled to be with the group, then you can. And if you want to just stick with one or two people or by yourself, you can. And so that was really nice. And I think that the times that we were together as a group were phenomenal. I loved the conversations that came out of that. And it wasn't just conversations, it was like light bulbs going off. It was new ideas, new relationships being forged.
Yeah, and along with that, Laura and I kinda do this debrief with ourselves during and after other retreats, and we did, though, still land on the place where, okay, in the future, with the schedule, we still would like to do, I think we landed on, Laura, like, more time blocks where we're together so that when it's hard to, like, not be together for an hour and then you're coming back because you can't really go off and do that much by yourself for an hour. So, like, to block it a little more so you have more free time, like, chunks of free time on your own, and then chunks when you're together versus on and off, on and off.
Yeah, and I think we did well with what we had. A cruise ship doesn't have like meeting rooms, to be together for multiple hours at a time. If you're doing something a bit more educational or conversation, and then I think all attendees are different. You know, we had one say if there was a full education day in the future, it may not be their cup of tea. And then somebody else at the same time said, well, that is my cup of tea. I would love that. And so I think that's where market research and surveys will come in handy, and feedback. And I think try to appease as many people as possible, but it's not going to be absolutely perfect for every single person.
And I think some of that stress you're alluding to, Mary, was maybe more a victim of the ship that we were on. It was the Virgin Voyages that like didn't do buffet style, so it was all restaurants. And I know personally as an attendee, that was stressful because we were getting emails ahead of time being like, book your reservations, and everybody's like, well, I don't know what everyone's doing. So it was this like a bunch of planners wanting to plan, but not really being able to plan until we were there. And then all of a sudden to have, 12 people go eat dinner together was like, you should have made a reservation 3 weeks ago. And all of us are like, well, we didn't know. Like, I think there was a lot of lessons learned. I know personally, just because I had never been on one of those, to realize that, yeah, some of that, like from an attendee perspective, if you wanted us to plan that, then we all should have probably done it a lot earlier. And we made it work. We did walk-ins and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it was a nice schedule. I know I came away feeling refreshed from it. So that was, I appreciated the free time that you guys gave us, and the group things as well. Kind of touching on, what are some of the lessons learned that you guys have from planning both this retreat as well as the last two before this?
I'm going to say something really quick because I'm going to forget, because I thought about this earlier. One of the lessons that I learned is that I also need to retreat, because there were so many times that Mary was like, you just need to relax. Like, I can't relax. We've got things to do, but we didn't really have that much to do. And that's something that personally I need to work on, learn how to relax when you have pockets of time, when you're not together as a group, even though we did so many things in advance. Whereas like last year in 2023, we were doing a lot of things on the day. This time everything was just, all the little gifts were put together in advance. But I think that was my biggest lesson learned, was my own participation in a retreat that I planned. So that was an interesting observation when Mary told me to relax.
Laura, do you need your own retreat from a retreat?
Yeah. Well, we talk about that. So from the host perspective, if you are planning or hosting a retreat, whether it's, something internal or not, it seems fun because you're usually going somewhere off-site, somewhere fun, but it is tiring. Just like you're planning any other event, there is a level of exhaustion because you're hosting it, you're always on, you're making sure people know what they're doing. So there's just a level of, yes, it's still an event. So maybe keep that in mind as you're planning your retreats. But yeah, we have also said as the host that we needed to take a day after the retreat to be able just to offload and debrief and like have a minute where not everybody is there. And we didn't do that this time. We had done it previously, but we didn't do it this time. So we're like, if we need to go back to like having a moment. I'm sure there are many other debriefs and lessons that we've learned. Laura, can you think of any others?
Let me ponder for a moment. You go first.
We definitely do a debrief every year. So some of the notes that we took from our most recent one, which could be applicable to you, is that because this is your event, kind of like we were just saying, like, well, if it is something that you're planning and have that control over, that don't have the event run you, make sure you're running the event. This could be applicable to any kind of event, I think, that you're in charge of. When you're hosting, sometimes it's hard to also be the person who is like speaking and facilitating. That's something that I learned. I think Laura enjoys that a little bit more than I do. And so I was like, I can't host it, speak, and facilitate. It's too much. Like I can't be on all the time like that. We talked about as hosts, always accounting to have the spa access because we just needed some time sometimes. I mean, these are all like host lessons learned, but and one other thing I will say, which is probably just an intro to a larger discussion another time, but we had a range of ages that participated in the retreat, which I think is amazing. Like different perspectives were brought, but we like often found ourselves trying to make sure that younger professionals were engaged and they felt like that they belonged there. And that actually is something that we've constantly, I don't know, Laura, what you would add to that, but that's a challenge for us personally, where we're like, we really want to make sure that they feel like they're meant to be here.
Same, and even for older event professionals, because it was such a big range. I hate ageism in any industry, but I find it very prevalent in the event industry, which, ironically, there's it's mostly young people, but there's ageism both ways. And so I think that was something we really wanted to make sure that didn't happen. And varying ways that you could do that. We had a seating chart at every single time we got together, just to spice it up. Very have different ages sitting next to each other, different experience levels, different skill sets in the event industry. And I think that's a huge thing going forward. Anytime you're doing a retreat, it's like breaking the ice. If you can break that ice immediately, then I think it prevents any kind of isms, from popping up later on.
Yeah. And then one more lesson learned was that, and we've learned this every year, Laura, and haven't done anything about it, but is have someone run the social media for us. Because if you're doing a retreat where you are posting about it, that's part of your shtick, you need to be showing what you're doing. That's a job, in and of itself, kind of. That's a whole thing to stay on top of the content. So if content's important to your retreat, maybe just think of having someone help you out with that.
Yeah, I knew I was forgetting something else, but absolutely have somebody do the social media. And that includes filming and taking a lot of photos, because there were times that I wish there's not as many photos and videos of our times together, we're having a group discussion or you and I are facilitating something. And so not just someone posting, because we have all the ideas of what to post. We don't have the time to do it, but also actually getting content while you're doing it. And I've seen on a lot of retreats, and even if it's a single day retreat, people now are having videographers come and social media specialists do that, which I think is great and something that absolutely everybody should do if they're planning a retreat. And we're going to do it next year. So if you're listening and that's what you do, then maybe we should talk.
I love it. Well, we're getting almost towards the end of our time, but we've talked a lot about how the retreat went this year and some of the ins and outs behind planning the retreat. But what's coming up for the future of future Event Pros on the Go retreats?
Well, as this episode releases mid-April, we are definitely planning on doing a 2025 retreat. Maybe you can add an S to the end of that. I don't know. We'll see. To be determined. You heard it here first. So retreat or retreats, you'll see. And we as you've noticed, we kind of change the theme each year. We're rolling with that. Every year we're keeping it different. And so you can decide each year if it's something that applies to you or not, but we're trying to just keep shaking it up. And I think that's what you'll see in 2025. Laura, what would you like to add to that?
I think you hit the nail on the head. We're planning, we are getting feedback from event pros, and working with locations. And, it's a process. It's a lot to just immediately plan it when you finish one, but it's definitely in the process. And I think if you are interested, then you should absolutely reach out to us and just know that we're making things for everyone. And I think the event industry is very entrepreneurial. And so perhaps we're making one for those people in the event industry and one for the ones who are not the entrepreneurial type. So we want to make sure there's something for everyone. So as Mary said, you heard it here first. There may be more than one in the process.
Look at this breaking news coming out on the Better Events podcast. Well, Laura, you already mentioned a little bit before we let you go. Where can listeners find out more about the retreat or retreats?
Absolutely check out our Instagram, Event Pros on the Go. You can check us out on LinkedIn as well. And our email is eventprosonthegoretreat gmail.com. And if you want to be the first to hear about things, you can message us on those platforms or email us, and we'll put you on our mailing list.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for being here, and Mary for putting your Event Pros on the Go hat on.
Logan, thanks for interviewing us, and thanks for attending the retreat.
Yeah, thank you for attending.
Just a big Event Pros on the Go love fest here for this episode.
Absolutely.
But thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Laura. And before we end, we do have our bonus tip that we have each week, which Logan has for us today.
Yes, this is a production pro tip that came out of an event that I did in the last 6 weeks or so. If you are planning on having a handheld camera, which means it's not on a tripod, it's usually on somebody's shoulder during your next in-person event, or even if you're doing a virtual or hybrid event, consider adding an easy rig to your AV order. This is what it really looks like. It's a rig. It's a, something they put over their chest, and it essentially holds the weight of the camera for them. And it's a dual benefit for you because you're going to get smoother shots, especially if you have like a complex kind of show where they're following people around or you're going into the audience, and you're going to save your camera operator's shoulder. So you get a happy crew member, you get better shots. Honestly, it's a win-win. And your AV company might already be suggesting this, but if you're just doing a lot of, an event with a lot of movement, I can't encourage you more to just double check and make sure that you have it at your next event.
That's a great bonus tip. And we were part of an event where someone was wearing this, and it was like alien vibes. It looked really cool. The whole thing was just, it
does come out of their
cool.
back kind of,
Yeah,
but it takes
yeah.
the weight off. And I've gone for a number of my sporting events now. I go to their handheld operators. I'm like, why aren't you using an easy rig?
Yeah.
I'm like, we don't do that in sports for the poor guys who have to sit for basketball, like under the basket and stuff. And I went, your shoulder must be killing you.
We love good innovations, and that seems to be one of them. So great bonus tip, Logan. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. You can follow us and find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also connect with Logan and I or Laura, our guest, directly on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you. And then thank you so much for listening. We will be back with you again next Wednesday.